Hello and welcome back to another Aspects of Archaeology. In today's episode we're going to be taking a look at a piece of technology that helps to tackle an age-old problem. For as long as people have been interested in archaeological sites, they have attempted to draw out maps and plans of these sites. In the 17th century, for example, William Stukeley drew an imagined landscape surrounding Avebury and Stonehenge. As the discipline of archaeology developed, so too pioneers such as Sir Mortimer Wheeler strove for more accurate plans. Gridding the site, for example, is a methodical way to excavate, but it also helps when it comes to drawing out what has been found. Just as a small grid can be used to record fairly small finds, a large grid can be used to map out an entire site. Of course, archaeologists haven't always relied on pen and paper. Photography and also filmmaking became a key tool in recording archaeological sites. Archaeologists were fairly early adopters, and they embraced new opportunities, such as with the balloonist Eduard Spelterini. His flights and photography, such as over the Giza Plateau, afforded archaeologists a whole new perspective on even the most familiar sites. More recently, aerial photography and even military surveys have given archaeologists the tools to look down on archaeological sites, and sometimes, if you're really lucky, you can even plan a bespoke flight into your archaeological investigation. However, most archaeological projects and most archaeologists don't have the cash for that, so they're much more grounded, but also inventive. For example, the use of cherry pickers and scaffolding on site to get a top-down view of an excavation, and even kites have been deployed with cameras hanging below to take aerial photographs. So archaeologists have been trying to get that top-down plan view more and more accurate with more and more interesting details since really they started excavating archaeological sites. And the latest response to this question and this problem, as you know from the title of this video, is drones or quadcopters. As a practical design, quadcopters have been around since the early 20th century. But it wasn't until the early 21st century that advances in electronics saw the production of lightweight flight controllers, accelerometers, GPS systems and cameras that could be built into smaller scale quadcopters. It was now, if you'll forgive the pun, that the design could truly fly. Some archaeologists have set up companies based around this technology.
And now we've been using UAVs or drones for the last few years, and of course now fully qualified and insured and things like that, and improved by the Civil Aviation Authority to use the latest bits of equipment which give us greater versatility and the ability to get cameras all over and into positions so that we can create 3D models or use photogrammetry or structure from motion in order to create 3D models of the archaeology in the ground or in the historic buildings or the ancient monuments that we're looking at.
With the increasing availability of drone technology, in particular the release of the DJI Phantom 4 and similarly user-friendly models, archaeologists are increasingly able to train themselves and their colleagues in the use of this technology. Arguably, there is a second wave of technology adoption happening now. These archaeologists are not drone or survey specialists. However, they are able to use this semi-specialist equipment in their research. This footage was captured by Dan Lawrence of Durham University. We'll return to him and his research at the end of this video. But for now, let's hand over to Aaron to hear more about the practicalities of drones.
With me, I got a drone about a year ago. It's this right here. It's a DJI Phantom 4. It's got a 4K camera on it. One of the higher end drones. And the purpose of getting this drone in the beginning was just the technology possibilities with it, with archaeology and doing surveys. And hopefully over time, different types of technology such as LiDAR could be used once it's more miniaturized and the payloads lighter to be used on these drones to help with archaeologists with surveying areas of possible interest. And so that was my original purpose of getting this drone. There are a lot of things that would come up after I finally got the drone and got experience with it that really don't come to mind when you first buy one. Most of the people I know just sit there and say, oh, you got a drone, lucky, you get to play with your toy, you get to play with your toy. And while, yes, it's very fun and entertaining, there's some things that just really need to be addressed that I didn't look at beforehand. Beforehand, it was a drone. It can go up really high, you can take really sharp pictures, it's got GPS on it, it could do all the things that I wanted to, it had sensors on it, so I wouldn't have to worry about it running into things. But after I had it, and I flew it for a little while, the controls really weren't a problem. The flying wasn't really a problem. The problem that I hadn't really considered beforehand was the liability. You know, the whole danger of, let's say, a flyaway where, you know, your remote loses link with the drone and it just goes flying off into who knows where. I mean, you never know where it lands. It might get stuck in a tree, and that's luck. But it could also very well, it could hit a person. It could go near an airport and possibly endanger people flying in airplanes. It could lose power and fall into a highway and hit a car. I mean, there's so many possibilities that can make you liable. Or if you're doing, let's say, flying over a crowd, taking some really cool video, and all of a sudden it loses power and plummets down and hits someone in the crowd. That liability, that responsibility that falls on you as the operator, the PIC, pilot in command, really didn't register with me when I first got the drone. I was like, oh, I'll just do archaeology work with it and it'll be great. And as I started trying to learn more to become a commercial pilot in command, I realized there was a whole lot more to the world of drones that I didn't realize beforehand. Case in point, the laws, for instance, not just here in the United States. In the United States, we have the Part 107 that's done by the Federal Aviation, but in other countries as well, the technology is still so new and still being molded, I guess is the best way to put it, being developed and crafted, that it's hard to enforce laws when they keep changing. So as far as the laws go, like here in the United States, just to give you some examples of stuff that's changing all the time, is the drones can't be used, the uses for the drone, like they cannot be used to carry objects right now. That's just not allowed. You can't fly it at night. You can only fly it at 400 feet at the maximum. You got to understand certain airspaces. While you don't think that's necessarily important, or some people may not necessarily see it important, it's very critical to understand what kind of airspace you're trying to fly your drone in. And I'm not talking about inside your house, but outside as well. Where I live, less than 5 miles away, is a pretty good sized airport. That's used not just for commercial, but it's also used by the military. And if someone has a drone, and heaven forbid, it suddenly loses link and flies off into that more of a higher airspace, that could get people hurt and can get you into a lot of trouble. And so these laws are extremely important, but again, they're extremely difficult to enforce right now because they're changing. I mean, the city that I live in, the city council, they don't have any laws. They don't know really how it works, and that's because it's always changing. Also, like I've spoken with Mr. Soup, how it is over in the UK. It's the same thing. These laws, they just keep morphing and changing, and so it's kind of hard. How are you going to enforce something when it's changing on an almost monthly basis? So the laws are very difficult to enforce, and the best thing you could try to do is, if you're going to fly a drone, for one, notify the people around you. That's would be my advice. Notify the people around you that what you're doing, so they don't get paranoid that the government's spying on them or something. Let law enforcement know, just in case. So if someone does call law enforcement, they go, yes, we're aware, but there's a drone flying around and it's doing this. And lastly, just be aware of your surroundings. You know, if you're near people, if you're near someplace that might be a hazard, you got to take these things into consideration, even if it's just for flight and just for fun.
So we've outlined a little bit about the technology itself, just how useful it can be for archaeology, but also some of the things you should be aware of, especially if you want to become a drone specialist. Now let's take a look at some case studies. The first time I was really impressed with the use of drones in archaeology was in 2011 at the site of Tuekta in the Altai Mountains in Russia. Here, archaeologists had deployed a small drone with a camera attached to explore landscape that was extremely hard to access. This camera was able to create a 3D model that enabled them to confirm the presence of burial mounds. So-called Kurgan burial mounds were confirmed on the site, and all because of drone technology. The discovery of archaeological remains in a rugged landscape due to drones.
A case study in specific is in New Mexico, where the Pueblo people are, like Choco Canyon down in New Mexico. And there is a site just south of Choco Canyon that's called Blue Jay. It's a Pueblo village, about 50 houses. And these houses, over time, have become overgrown with vegetation, and also the sandstone that has come from the nearby cliffs have actually buried the site, or partially buried it. And these sites have been covered up over the years, and just a couple years ago they were able to use the drone and use infrared and actually see the different colors, because of course different structures and stuff absorb heat and cold differently, and so you can see a better picture. And they actually found buildings that they didn't even realize existed. They thought there was only 50, and they thought, well, that's kind of odd, it's a smaller village. But almost all the villages had some universal structures that they weren't not seeing here, and they thought that was just really strange. They suddenly said, oh my, there is actually more here than we thought, which would basically open up a whole new area of research for this Blue Jay that they didn't even know existed.
Our third case study returns as promised to Dan Lawrence. You may recall we interviewed him a couple of weeks ago on this channel. Dan is an expert at bringing together lots of different types of information about a landscape and interpreting the archaeology therein. Traditionally, this work would involve the use of satellite and map data, but increasingly, drones are becoming a go-to technology for smaller scale or more detailed research. Here, for example, each of the blue squares represents a point in space and a plane from which a photo was taken of an old canal site in Azerbaijan. Employing a technique called photogrammetry, each of these photos can be used to construct a 3D model of the site, almost as though you're viewing the site from all different angles at once. This results in a 3D model that can be moved and scrutinized in a computer to better understand the full context, the totality of the site in question. So there you have it, drones and archaeology. These machines have the potential to become pretty much indispensable in the near future, if not already. Not only as the price point comes down and the specialist services become, I suppose, less expensive, and also more and more archaeologists are training themselves to use drones, then why wouldn't you have this technology deployed on your archaeological site? Not only does it quite literally give you that extra perspective, that context, top-down view that we've been chasing really since day one in archaeology, but it's also a very charismatic way, if nothing else, to present your site, to show people what your site is in its landscape as you fly through and fly over it. And beyond just how you look at the site, in the near future, with increasing miniaturization of electronic components, we're going to see more accessibility to LiDAR, various forms of scanning technology, essentially low-level satellite analysis, as it were. Therefore, this technology, without ever having to get into an aeroplane, is surely going to be the way forward in terms of understanding archaeology from above. So, from an archaeological perspective, drones are all good. However, there is one final thing I would say, and that is from I suppose a third party or a public perspective, I suppose, and that is that drones can be rather annoying. Last time we were at Castle Rigg Stone Circle in Cumbria, we went there for a picnic with friends. It was a lovely sunny day and people were milling around the stones. Some people were climbing on the stones, which was a little bit annoying. But nonetheless, it was a nice and fairly pleasant day. Lots of members of the public around, ourselves included. And then this guy comes in off the road with a mysterious package, which soon, it became clear, contained a drone. He set it up and set it flying. And he proceeded to record the entire monument, the whole circle, and then shoot it from above and all this kind of thing, and get down and get a landscape background kind of shot as well. And then the drone ran out of battery, so he put it back in his box and went away. And that was extremely irritating. Don't be that guy, because frankly he did several things wrong, which I think Aaron already really alluded to. First of all, he didn't ask anyone's permission to be on film. Secondly, I can't imagine the footage was that great, given that the stones were, as I say, literally people were climbing all over them. But third, it's just blooming annoying. I mean, the noise of the drone, while you're trying to have a picnic, well, it's a little bit irritating. So don't be that guy. Anyway, on an archaeological site, hopefully you won't have too many people just sort of there to picnic. But unless, be aware of the public, I suppose, is what I'm saying, and be safe primarily. These things can be dangerous. Anyway, guys, hopefully this has been interesting. Hopefully maybe it's made you think a little bit differently about drones and archaeology if you were a bit skeptical previously. And well, as ever, until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.